Hello, thank you for joining Matthews Digital. My name is Aaron, and today we are going to see how to structure our T24 program, the control flow of a typical T24 program. Info Basic, the T24 programming language, like any other programming language, has all these three types of control structures: sequential, conditional, and loops. So any program in any programming language can have these three. The default execution of any program is sequential. This means that instructions in a program are executed from top to bottom, each line. Then you have conditional. The conditional flow is used for making decisions. For example, you may say, if the balance of a customer is less than 5,000, then charge 5%. If it is between 5,000 and 10,000, then charge 3%. If it is above 10,000, don't charge. There is also repetition flow, or what we call loops. Loops allow the execution of a piece of code multiple times. So instead of writing the same instructions multiple times, you write one piece of a program and you execute it multiple times. You may have 10 customers and you want to get the name and the address for these 10 customers. Instead of writing the instruction 10 times for getting address and name, you can write one piece of code which gets the name and address. Through loop, you execute it 10 times. You write it once and you execute it multiple times. Now, let's see these types of control structures in InfoBasic, how they are implemented. We start by conditional statement. Because we're not going to talk about the sequential. Sequential is the default. So the program are executed from top to bottom. So we are going to focus on these two, conditional and loops. In T24, there are two types of conditional statements. One is if statement, the other one is case statement. In our previous videos, we have talked about if statement a little bit. Today, I'm going to also explain a bit about if statement, and then I'm going to show you a case statement and when to use case statement and when to use if statement. In most of cases, you will be using if statement. Case statement is mainly used when you have multiple conditions to check, and instead of writing if else, you can use case. In other programming language, it's known as switch case. We are going to see loops. There are different loops in InfoBasic, but we'll be focusing on these two: for, next, and loop repeat. With these two loops, you can write any program. Now, let's see a typical flow of any program. This can be T24 program, a Java program, a Python program. This is in general how these three control flows are implemented. So a program has a begin and end. Here we can say maybe we collect some data and then we check condition. If a condition is fulfilled, Then we can execute process A, process B, and we go back, we check the condition again. If the condition is still true, we repeat this execution until the condition becomes false. Then we execute another process and end our program. So from top to bottom, as you can see, we have sequences, instruction A, B, C, D, and so on. And here we can decide, this is conditional statement. We can decide either to go this way or to go the other way until we end. So any program can be written in this way. We have sequences, meaning different instructions to be executed along. You have conditions. You may have more than one condition, and you may have loops. And inside here, inside this loop, we may also have condition. So basically, your program can combine all these three. You can have all these three in one program. So let's dive into a practical session. All right. To save our time, I have already created a subroutine to fetch customer records. So this subroutine is called MTD customer details. It's going to accept customer ID as inward parameter, and it's going to return customer name and customer residence. So this will return here. Customer name is the short name, and residence is EB resident. So it is a very simple subroutine. I'm going to have a source code in the description. Basically, you're going to take this subroutine, you compile and catalog. And we are going to call it in another program. So this subroutine is going to be called from this program. This is just a test program, but it is going to help us to grasp all the concepts, the loops and the conditional statements. So I also have here a list of test customers. I have 6 customers for testing purpose. This is a string, but I'm using change. Change is going to convert this comma into field mark. So I'm converting this string into a dynamic array, and then I can count how many records I have. To count the number of records in a dynamic array, we use dcount. So I can say numRec, so number of records is a dcount. I get my dynamic array, and I want to use field mark as a separator. So our dynamic array has a separator as field mark. So we are counting how many records we have in this dynamic array customers. Now, since we have this number of record, let's start with the for loop and if statement. We have already seen these two in our previous videos. So I'm going to start with for loop and if statement because this is going to be like a revision. And then we will move to a case statement and loop repeat. So quickly, for loop starts with for and the counter. So you say the element start from 1 to number of record, and then we are going to increment I at each iteration. So here inside our loop, we put the instruction, the statement we want to execute multiple times. So what we want to execute multiple times is the call to this subroutine. So we do call and the name of our subroutine with all the parameters, inward and outward parameters. And then let's print all these informations. So we can do CRT, and let's concatenate this information. Let's say using a star as a delimiter. Okay, we need to get customer ID. So to get our customer ID, we can get our customer ID from this dynamic array, and we pick the element at I position. So for the first time, because we have I as 1, it is going to pick the first customer and then call our subroutine, passing this customer ID, and our subroutine is going to return customer name and customer residence. And we are going to print this. We move to the next. So we do next I. It's going to increment this counter. And here we are going to have I as 2. And for the second time, customer ID is going to be this one, and so on until we get to the last record. Okay? Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to copy our source code, and we come here, we do jet mathc.bp. The name of our program is test.prog.b. I'm going to paste our source code here, Ctrl V, formatted properly. We do a file. Let's compile our source code. Basic, no error, catalog. Fantastic. So let's run our program. Test prog. Fantastic. As you can see, we have our 6 customers. So we have customer ID, the name, and the resident. So we have different residents. Now, here we have LU as the residence, RW, Rwanda, Luxembourg, USA, Luxembourg, and USA. Now, suppose we want to print only those customers whose residence is US. So meaning this customer and this. For that, we can use if statement. Okay? Here where we're printing, we can put condition. We say if residence equals US, then print customer details. Okay. Let's save and give it a shot. So jet, I'm going to delete this one. And let's paste our source code. We do a file, basic, catalog, and let's run our program. Fantastic. As you can see, we only have customers whose residence is US. Now, we can also have else. Can do else, if as well. Let's say if now residence equals LU, we do then and let's print a different message. We can say CRT, let's pick customer name. We say is a resident of Luxembourg. Okay. Then else so here the third condition. So the first of all, it's going to check if a customer is a US resident and it's going to print all the details. If a customer is a LU resident, it's going to print the customer name and say is a resident of Luxembourg. Now for a customer who is not a US and not a Luxembourg resident, let's print the customer ID, the name, so we grab the name, let's have in parentheses, we put the residence. So we put the residence in parentheses. Okay, this to show the difference. So for a US resident, we are going to see the custom information with star as delimiter. For a resident of Luxembourg, we are going to see the name and the message is a resident of Luxembourg. For other customers, we are going to have the customer ID, hyphen, customer name, and in parentheses, we're going to put the residence. Okay, so as you can see, we have if, else. Three conditions. Let's copy our updated source code. We delete the old program. Let's paste the updated source code. Ctrl V. Okay, let's give it a shot. Compiled successfully. Catalog. Okay, let's run. Fantastic. Now, as you can see, we have American Express Luxembourg is a resident of Luxembourg. But when it comes to this customer whose residence is not US and not Luxembourg, we have a customer ID hyphen customer name, and in parentheses we have residence. We have CDL is a resident of Luxembourg. For US resident, we have a full information printed with the star as delimiter. So as you can see, we have different conditions and our program is working properly. Now, you might get confused when you have if, else, if, else, if, else. So let's replace this if, else with case statement. Normally, case statement is used when you have a lot of conditions. So let's replace this if statement with case statement and see how to use it. So we can do case. Case statement is written in this way. We have begin case and end case. And in between, we have different conditions. So we can grab our conditions the way they are. We say condition 1 is case resident is US. What are we going to do? We are going to print this message. All right? Okay. Case residence is Luxembourg. we are going to print this message. Let's have another case. Case customer residence is RW. We are going to print this, and we can delete this if statement. Okay, as you can see, at least our program now is a bit short. And easy to read, because we have multiple conditions, and the way the case statement arranges these cases, it's very simple to see. Okay? Good. But in most cases, we'll be using if statement. You won't have multiple cases to check. Hopeful. So let's copy the updated source code. We delete the old one. Okay. Let's paste the updated source code. Control V. F5. Let's compile. Successfully compiled. Let's catalog. Good. And let's give it a shot. Fantastic. As you can see, we still have the same information printed. But here we have used case statement, not if statement. Now, let's see loop and repeat. I'm going to push this a bit here, and I'm going to type loop. So how does loop repeat work? We repeat the instruction between loop and repeat in this way. We are going to grab a customer ID, cust ID, from this list of customers, and then we set position. This pos is a pointer to the delimiter. So in this case, we are going to grab this customer and set a pointer to FM, because we have changed comma to FM. So, and then we can say, while we have this customer ID and we have this position, meaning the delimiter, we want to execute our instructions. So the instruction we want to execute is a call to a subroutine, and this one. So as long as we have a customer from this list, we are going to call our subroutine and get the data, customer name and the residence, and the rest remains the same. So let me remove the for loop and this, because we don't need any more. So this is our final program. So we have a list of customers. We have changed the delimiter to field mark, and at a time we're going to loop through this list of customers, and at each iteration we'll be picking one customer ID from this list and setting a position to the delimiter. We check, do we have a customer ID and the delimiter? Then we call our subroutine and we check these conditions and we repeat again. Once you reach the last record, the position is going to be 0. So after that, we won't loop again because the position will be 0. So our loop will stop. let's copy our source code. We are going to delete this one. You can do jet fd, yes. Then let's paste our updated source code. Ctrl V, fi, basic to compile. Okay, let's do catalog. Fantastic. Now let's run our program. All right, as you can see, our program is still working, but now it is using loop repeat and case statement. So I hope now you understand how to use loops and how to use conditional statements. We have combined the two. We started by for loop and if statement. We moved to for loop with a case statement, and you have concluded with loop repeat with case statement. Please consider subscribing if you haven't. Share and like this video. See you next. Bye bye.